So, I wanted to give you a flavor of how these methods are used to solve certain problems. So, first let us address the issue of computing. Let us say we want to compute on a mesh which is fairly large, and we want to do parallel computing, in the sense that there is a computer with several processors on it, and for one single mesh we want to use all of them together. So, typically what we do is we break the mesh into several parts. In this case, for example, if I have 32 nodes, and each node may have one processor. So, if I have 32 processors, I may want to break this problem into 32 sub problems, and we would like to keep all the neighbors as close to each other as possible, so that the information is internal to each processor. We have as little communication from one processor to the other. So, that is called domain partitioning. The equations that we get from finite elements are solved using iterative solver. We use GMRes for that, and we precondition them with diagonal entries. And for message passing between processors, we typically use MPI library, the message passing interface. So, in parallel computing, we want to make sure that the communication, it is a bottleneck and most expensive. So, that should be minimized. Even if we have to do calculations again and again, we want to repeat them. Compared to communications, they are fast and cheap. So, we can we prefer them over communications. We have three kinds of storage: storage at the node level, then at the element level, and at the equation level, and the communication should be done in a manner that it is most efficient. Typically, in a finite element program, we use about 10% of the time in communications, and you can see that most of the time, almost 80%, is actually spent in doing the Ax equal to b, the linear solver, and then of course some time is spent on other operations. So, this is a picture of one of the clusters that we used. Of course, now we have a much bigger cluster. So, I wanted to show you what happens when you try to use a big cluster as far as the efficiency is concerned. So, on the x axis is the number of processors or the number of cores that we are using, and the y axis is the speed up. So, speed up means that if I am using one single processor versus if I use n number of processors, then ideally my code should speed up by a factor of n. So, that is called the linear speed up, and that is denoted by this red line. Of course, there would be overheads, communication overheads. So, I would very rarely achieve that. So, let us see what happens. So, if I take a mesh which is not so large, it has only about 2 million nodes, roughly 17 million equations, then you can see that after about 200 processors, it starts saturating. So, it starts departing from the red line. But if I go to a bigger mesh, this time with about 70 million equations, so those are the hollow boxes. So, I get a little bit better speed up, but that also saturates after some time. So, what it shows is that as I increase the number of cores, I must also have a larger problem size. Okay? So, if I have a given problem size, I cannot expect it to scale linearly with the number of processors. Okay? So, typically you can see that if I had a mesh with about 370 million equations to be solved every nonlinear iteration, then as far as this code is concerned from our laboratory, it gives almost a linear speed up till about 600 or 700 processors, and then of course that would also start slowing down. So, I want to show you some applications using the formulations that we just discussed. So, these are some of the things that we will talk about. So, first the air intakes. So, here is a picture of Concorde, and these are the intakes that feed the engine. Okay. So, typically these are air breathing engines where when the pilot steps on the throttle, so he needs more air, and these intakes should admit that mass flow rate of the air. Okay. Now, there is going to be combustion inside these engines, and the aircraft is moving forward at a high speed, and typically what you would want is that the engine should not flame out. Okay. So, air coming in should slow down so that we do not get a flame out, and the kinetic energy of the air, because of this high speed, should actually be used by the flow in terms of higher pressure and so on. So, this is a close up view of the intakes. These are these ducts, and we would like that when the flow approaches the engine, at the engine phase the flow should be as uniform as possible, and these intakes should operate at high efficiency. In fact, if you look at the reusable launch vehicle, hypersonic vehicles, you have similar intakes. So, this is a typical intake, and there is a air breathing engine inside, shown is the view here, and you would like the flow to slow down using these shocks, so that you get, by the time you get a combustion here, the Mach number is fairly low. So, you can get various types of intakes in supersonic aircrafts. So, given here are 3 examples. You could have an external compression wherein all the compression of the flow takes place outside the engine, or you could have a completely internal compression. So, through this system of oblique shocks, and finally a weak normal shock, or you could have a mixture of internal as well as external, shown here as mixed compression. We know that a subcritical operation of a shock of an intake is undesirable. So, this normal shock, when it moves upstream of the throat, it is actually unstable, one can show that. The shock location should be such that the normal shock is as weak as possible, and that typically happens when the upstream Mach number is close to 1. So, that would happen when you are at the critical location. So, this is the most efficient system to have the normal shock, because the normal shock is weak, therefore, the losses across the shock are the smallest. As you know, across a shock you would have pressure loss, the density will increase, and so on. So, the total pressure loss is the one we are talking about. So, supercritical operation is stable, critical is neutrally stable, but it is most efficient. This one could be inefficient, and the subcritical is a disaster. That means the shock has moved upstream, and once it moves upstream it is unstable. So, it can be expelled out, and then you can get an unstarting of the intake, which means you will not get enough mass flow rate through the engine, and your engine could flame out. So, here is a schematic of the calculation that will be done. So, we want to model a mixed compression intake, but only the intake part of it, not the combustion part. So, we will assume that when the pilot wants to increase the throttle, so he pumps in more fuel, so the pressure inside the combustion chamber increases, and that pressure is actually acting as a back pressure on the air intake. So, we want to see the performance of this air intake at different back pressures. So, here is the geometry that has been chosen. It is a double ramp intake. Okay, so, this is the cowl, and a back pressure is applied at the back to see up to what back pressures this engine can sustain. This is a typical mesh, a finite element mesh. You can see it is a structured mesh near the solid body, and there is an unstructured mesh on the outside to account for all the geometrical complexities. So, the structured mesh is extremely fine to capture all the boundary layer details. So, here is what happens when you have a Mach 3 flow coming in. So, you see huge flow separation. So, that is the blue color is low Mach number, and the red is the high Mach number, and that way the engine does not get enough air, and therefore, the engine would not produce enough thrust. So, this is a situation where no boundary layer bleed is applied. Now, we want to apply a boundary layer bleed so that this flow can be a little bit more stable and thereby permitting more mass flow rate through this intake. So, we want to identify what are the areas of bleed. So, we identify the areas of flow separation, and this is what has been done. So, there are several areas of bleed that have been recommended: first region, second region, third region, and then one on the external cowl. So, once that is done, if we apply 6% total bleed, that means whatever is the mass flow rate that comes in through the engine, 6% of that is actually bled out, and that is common in aircrafts that's used for air conditioning, cooling, and so on. And you can see now you get a very nice flow, and you get the desired mass flow rate through the engine. So, this is a picture of what happens as I increase the back pressure. So, that was a supersonic outflow. Now, we start increasing the back pressure. So, the x axis is the ratio of the back pressure to the inlet pressure or the atmospheric pressure, and the y axis is the mass flow rate. So, for a typical case, let us say the red line, you would see that up to a certain back pressure you get a reasonable mass flow rate, and then as the back pressure increases, then there is a deterioration of the mass flow rate and possibly the engine can unstart. It can unstart in two ways. One is it just unstarts all of a sudden. The other is you could get an instability called the buzz instability, wherein there is an interaction between the shock wave and the boundary layer, and these the shock waves go back and forth in the intake, which I will just show you. So, here is a interesting case where the back pressure ratio is 21, but the bleed is very high, about 27%, and you can see that there are these normal shocks that are going back and forth. So, the flow is quite stable upstream of the throat, and the shock just about approaches the throat. So, this is fine, this is a stable operation. But if you increase now the back pressure, then of course you could get an instability. So, I am going to show you cases of a little buzz and a big buzz, okay? And both are driven by the super harmonics of the intake, which can be modeled as organ pipe. So, here is one example of a little buzz, wherein you will see that there is a separation which is induced here, and these shock waves they travel back and forth, okay, as you can see, and it is a very periodic phenomena. So, if you look at the mass flow rate through the throat of this engine, then you would see with time it shows a very periodic behavior. So, there are instances where you have reasonable mass flow rate, but there are other instances where you have very low mass flow rates, okay. And one can actually look at the physics and understand why this happens. I do not want to go into the details here, but it has a certain frequency, okay, and that frequency we identify as the buzz frequencies. So, this is the little buzz, wherein you get some flow separation and that instability travels back and forth. Now, I will show you an example of the big buzz. So, here is the big buzz, wherein this normal shock is actually more devastating and it travels back and forth. And now, if you look at the mass flow rate, then in fact at some time instant you even get the mass flow rate going back and going outside the cowl, okay. And this is the frequency associated with the big buzz. These are not desirable because one is the engine is not giving enough power, B, you could get a flame out, and the more devastating part is that because you are getting an oscillating power now, so it could also resonate with the frame, the airframe, and then a lot of destruction can happen. For example, the engine could fall off, or there could be other structural failures. So, buzz has to be identified at the design stage, and the airplane cannot be allowed to get into this instability, and obviously CFD can help you do that. Here is a very interesting case where you start with the little buzz and then that modifies or evolves into a big buzz, and it actually shows both these frequencies of big buzz and little buzz. We also want to look at the different kinds of intakes, for example the Y ducts. Okay. So, sometimes you will have engines. So, there is a single engine and there are two air intakes that supply air to that. So, something like our nose. So, we have two nostrils and they act as intakes and supply air through the windpipe to the lungs. There are several aircrafts that have the Y ducts. So, here is the geometry that was chosen for the analysis. So, we are going to refer to this as the top limb, the bottom limb, and then of course they merge, and that is where the flow goes to the engine. So, these are the boundary conditions, and we are also going to simulate the side slip. So, when the aircraft is not aligned with the flight direction, but it is actually side slipping, then the two intakes would get different mass flow rates, and that would produce another scenario which could lead to instabilities. Again, a typical finite element mesh. And just to show you, a typical flow would have a very interesting structure. So, you would have a very nice interaction between the boundary layer, the shocks and their reflections, and as a result of these shock waves, there would be these pressure fluctuations inside the boundary layer that would lead to an undulating structure of the boundary layer and its very rich dynamics. So, I am not going to go through the details, but just the idea is to show you that on the plane of back pressure and the side slip angle, you could get a variety of flow states from the regular shock strain towards something called the buzz instability. So, all these situations are possible, and you could actually do them through CFD and do a design of an intake to suit so that you do not get anything unexpected. Typically, the mass flow rate picture looks like this. So, on the x axis is the pressure ratio, the y axis is the mass flow rate, and up to some pressure ratio things are fine, and then as you increase the throttle further, which leads to increase in back pressure, then the performance of the intake deteriorates depending on the side slip angle. So, if you are in a zero side slip flight, the deterioration takes place at a larger back pressure, but for a large slip flight side slip angle, it could happen a little bit earlier. These are typical flows that one could see. So, here the side slip angle is 5, and these are increasing back pressures, just to show you the complexity of the flow. Okay. So, I will show you just one case where the flow actually unstarts. So, here is an example of buzz instability, where the side slip angle is 5 degree, and what you will notice is that through the lower limb the flow goes in, but then it kind of separates and it goes actually upstream and flows over the cowl on the upper limb. Okay. So, this is a situation where you get positive mass flow rate in one of the limbs, and in fact a negative mass flow rate through the other limb, and that is a complete disaster. So, you do not want that.